letter arrived on a Thursday morning, and I almost didn't open it. I almost didn't open it because I was in the middle of fixing a fence post that had been bothering me for a week, and a fence post that needs fixing doesn't care what is in your mail. But I opened it. Chicago law firm. 3 last names on the letterhead, the kind of letterhead that costs money specifically, so you will know it costs money. The kind of official intimidation that says, "We have lawyers and you are about to get crushed." I read all 4 pages standing at the kitchen counter in my barn coat. The kitchen smelled like coffee and WD-40. I had left the can out from working on the feeder mechanism, so the can sat where it sat. My great-grandfather put the first fence post on this land in 1901. My father received the formal agricultural operation permit from Sangamon County in 1959. I have the original in my filing cabinet, right where it has been since I was 6 years old, and my father showed it to me and said, "This is what keeps us here." And now, apparently, I was being sued by people who had moved in next door 2 years ago. Here is the part that would make you laugh if it didn't have a $337,000 punchline attached to it. Let me tell you about Claire and Desmond Whitmore, because you need to understand who these people were before you can appreciate what happened to them. 15 years of courtroom wins. The kind of jaw that makes juries want to believe him before he opens his mouth, and the instincts of a man who had learned to read people for a living. He was not a bad lawyer. In ordinary circumstances, he was actually a very good one. Claire was 41, former marketing director, 11 years managing product launches for pharmaceutical companies and retail chains in a regional airline. She had the specific gift of walking into any room and understanding within 30 seconds exactly what story was being told and how to redirect it. She was smart, strategic, and she had the kind of energy that fills whatever space it is in together. That was also, as it turned out, why the fall was so spectacular. The same machine that made them dangerous made them impossible to stop once they had pointed themselves in the wrong direction. And they had very much pointed themselves in the wrong direction. They had bought their home in Fenwick Crest subdivision in 2020 for $842,000. Good bones, good school district, good commute distance from Springfield. The listing photos showed rolling fields, clear sky, that particular Midwestern tranquility that photographs beautifully and smells on a warm morning when the wind comes off the south fields. Exactly like a working hog operation, they are the entire case. The first complaint arrived at my door in a certified letter 3 months before the lawsuit. Noise, specifically the sound of my hogs during the early morning feed. According to the letter signed by Claire Whitmore in her capacity as HOA president, which I hadn't known, the sounds constituted a violation of community noise ordinance standards and were, I quote, materially affecting the quality of life and property values of Fenwick Crest residents. I read it. Set it on the kitchen counter. Fed the hogs. The second complaint came 2 weeks later. Odor. A full page describing the smell from Mosley's Hollow Farm as a public health concern, attached to a survey that Claire had sent to the 27 households that responded, formatted to look like something a university had produced. Fourth complaint. The barn my grandfather built with his own hands 100 years before Claire Whitmore discovered it ruined her view. But Harriet Burns, who I hadn't called yet, who didn't even know my name yet, Harriet Burns would tell me later that every certified letter I received was a gift, and every response created a record, and a record is how you win. I wasn't ignoring them. Exactly. I was reading them carefully and then doing nothing, which is a different thing. I was waiting to understand what I was dealing with before I decided how to deal with it. What I was dealing with turned out to be considerably more organized than a few complaint letters. My son, Tommy, figured it out first. Tommy is 38, a structural engineer in Decatur, drives up on weekends to help when there is work that needs 2 people. He has his mother's way of looking at you when he has worked something out and is deciding how to say it, a particular stillness in his face, like the words are queued up and he is choosing the order. He drove up one Friday evening and found me watching a nature documentary about elk. After dinner, I looked up from the elk. Claire Whitmore is posting every other day, Tommy said. She has got a content calendar. Weekly themes. Week 1 is community impact. Week 2 is public health. Week 3 is what she calls economic justice. He paused. She means property values. But economic justice tests better with the demographic she is targeting. I set down my bowl. This isn't people complaining, Dad. This is a campaign. Someone who knows what they are doing is running it. And the lawyer she is working with, I looked him up, Desmond Whitmore is her husband. 15 years in commercial litigation out of Chicago. He leaned forward. Outside, the lights of Fenwick Crest made an orange smear against the low November clouds. I am calling Hattie Burns tonight, I said. Tommy blinked. You know Hattie Burns? Went to church with her mother for 20 years. Hattie Burns was a circuit court judge. She has forgotten more about Illinois property law than whoever's running that Facebook page has ever learned. And this, I set the bowl in the rack. She was 66, a former circuit court judge who had served 14 years on the Sangamon County bench before she quit, not retired. Quit because, as she once told me over coffee, she was tired of watching people lie from a position she couldn't hold them fully accountable for. She went back to practicing law, agricultural law specifically. Second-floor office on Millbrook Street above what used to be a dentist's practice. Metal filing cabinets, wooden desk with a burn mark on one corner that nobody asked about. A photograph on the wall of herself in a judge's robe in 1994, looking like she was made of wool and the specific gravity of a woman who has heard everything. Old leather bag with a patina. Just 66 years of paying very close attention. Just listened without interrupting. Paper copies if you have them. All right. And Everett. A pause. The sound of her mug on her desk. Keep doing exactly what you have always done. I found out later, weeks later, when Tommy pushed me that Hattie had already understood the shape of the whole case before I finished my first sentence. Everything after that wasn't discovery. Everything out at the barn lights and the orange glow of Fenwick Crest beyond the tree line. I thought about what Tommy had said. A campaign, a Facebook group, a Chicago litigation attorney who was also the HOA president's husband. They had momentum. They had a machine. What they didn't have, what they had no idea they didn't have, was the right statute. But I didn't know that yet either. The HOA meeting happened on a Wednesday night, and I wasn't there, obviously. But Tommy was. He sat in the back row of the Fenwick Crest community room, beige walls. The kind of institutional carpet that was installed in the late 80s and is not going to be replaced until it constitutes a structural hazard, and he watched Desmond Whitmore give the most professionally produced community meeting presentation he had ever seen in Granger's Bluff. Aerial photography of the subdivision laid next to aerial photography of the farm, the visual contrast doing persuasion work before a word was spoken, an odor frequency survey that Claire had formatted to look clinical. Truck traffic data. Tommy told me about those snickerdoodles, and I thought, that is the detail that tells you everything. A woman who brings homemade snickerdoodles to a room she is trying to convince of something has thought about it harder than the lawyer next to her with the projector. Desmond spoke for 40 minutes. He was organized, persuasive, and built on a legal theory that was clean and coherent, and based almost entirely on nuisance law precedent from Indiana and Iowa, not from Illinois. But nobody knew that yet. Not the 47 households who voted 47-0 to authorize the lawsuit. Not Claire, who stood at the back of the room afterward, accepting congratulations like someone who had already won something, which in that room, in that moment she had. And not Tommy, who sat in the back row and ate a snickerdoodle that he admitted, later, was genuinely excellent, and drove back to Decatur with the growing conviction that something was badly wrong with this whole situation. 1:15 in the morning. I was in bed with the light on and my agricultural equipment maintenance manual, which is where I usually am at that hour, and the phone on the nightstand buzzed. And I picked up and Tommy said, "Dad, I found it." "Found what?" "The statute." He read it to me. It took about 30 seconds. An agricultural operation that has lawfully existed for 1 year or more shall not be found to be a nuisance as a result of a change in conditions in or about the locality of such agricultural operation, if the operation was not a nuisance at the time of its establishment. Tommy's voice went up half a register the way it does when he has worked out the load-bearing math on something. Your permit is from 1959. Fenwick Crest was built in 2020. This lawsuit couldn't have won from the day Desmond sent that complaint. I sat with that for a moment. Hattie already knows, doesn't she? Tommy said. It wasn't really a question. Call her in the morning, I said. 8 of the clock. Confirm. And then get some sleep. You look like something Verdict dragged in from the creek. I watched him through the kitchen window, standing in the driveway in the cold, his breath clouding in the November air. He said, "Oh," once, and then, "Oh, that is," and then he was quiet for a long stretch. just listening, which means Hattie was talking in the particular tone. That means you stop what you are doing and pay attention. He came inside and poured himself coffee without saying anything. "Well," I said. She said he wrapped both hands around the mug. She said the longer they keep going, the more they commit to it on the record. She said every email, every public statement, every press contact is evidence of intent. She said she is going to let them build their own case against themselves. He looked at me, and she said, and I am quoting here, but I knew they were going to lose it. 26 pages, organized by tab, thorough, and professionally constructed. A solid legal argument built on the wrong foundation, filed with full confidence into a courtroom that was about to reveal that confidence is a very expensive mistake. And what happened next is important because it shows you exactly the kind of people they were. Within 48 hours of filing, Claire had activated everything. She called her contact at the Granger's Bluff Courier, a young city reporter 2 years out of U of I who was grateful for stories with clean narratives and quotable parties. Claire gave her clean narrative. She gave her specific numbers. By Thursday, the Facebook group had a posting schedule with sponsored content and a weekly resident spotlight feature where Claire interviewed neighbors about how the farm affected their daily lives. A woman described not being able to open her windows in summer. A man described his daughter's asthma. A retired couple described having to cancel an outdoor party because of the smell. All of it real, all of it genuine, all of it completely irrelevant to Illinois law, but devastating to public opinion, which was the point. Claire sent an all-hands email to every HOA household that Friday. It was well-written, emotionally precise, and it ended with a single sentence that would eventually cost them $250,000 in sanctions. "We are committed to pursuing this matter until they shut it down." 314 likes. Underlined that sentence with her blue ballpoint pen. Here is where I need to tell you about the thing that changed everything and nobody saw it coming. Not me, not Tommy, and especially not Desmond and Claire. 2 months after the lawsuit was filed, Desmond got a call from a journalist at the Chicago Tribune, not the Granger's Bluff Courier. The Tribune. Apparently the story had legs. HOA versus fourth-generation farm family, suburban sprawl consuming agricultural heritage, David and Goliath in the Illinois Corn Belt. The journalist wanted both sides. Claire managed that call personally. She was, by any objective measure. And then Claire did the thing that sealed their fate. She scheduled a press conference. On a Tuesday afternoon in front of the Fenwick Crest Community Room, with cameras from both television stations and a recorder from the Courier and about 30 residents standing behind her like a human backdrop of righteous indignation, Claire Whitmore stood at a podium that the HOA had rented for the occasion and said, into every microphone pointed at her, "This community will not back down. We will pursue every available legal and regulatory option until this situation is resolved." She had the bearing of someone who had never once stood at a podium and not been in control of what happened next. What happened next was that Hattie Burns watched the local news that evening, opened her red accordion folder, and added the press conference transcript to it. The folder was getting thick. Then Desmond read the statute. "I want you to understand the specific cruelty of this moment, not for dramatic effect, but because it explains everything that followed." He was an excellent attorney who had spent 15 years building expertise and had learned correctly that nuisance law follows consistent principles across jurisdictions. He just never applied that assumption to the most important question in the case. What does Illinois specifically say? It happened at 12:47 in the morning, 2 weeks after the preliminary hearing. He was sitting alone in the kitchen on decaf at his age, for reasons he resented with the laptop open, reading the statute for what he would later admit was the first and not the fourth time. Section 10. He read it. He read it again, clear as anything he would ever read, through the kitchen window, across the fence line and the dark pasture. The barn light at Mosley's Hollow Farm was on. It is always on at that hour. I am not a person who sleeps past 4:30. That light must have looked different to him that night than it ever had before. Steady, old. Something patient in a way that had absolutely nothing to do with him and never had. Claire found him there 20 minutes later. She read his face before he said a word. I had no reason to look at Illinois, reach out to his attorney, acknowledge the legal exposure. "We have spent $85,000 of HOA funds," Claire said. Her voice was careful. "The the careful voice of a woman holding something at a distance while she decides what to do with it. I stood at a podium on Tuesday. She looked at him. The silence that followed that question was the longest silence of their marriage. Find a crack in the statute. We don't have to win the lawsuit to win the community. He knew she was wrong. He knew, at 12:47 in the morning with the barn light burning outside his window, that she was wrong. He had 15 years of reading courtrooms, and he knew that Judge Barker was not going to look at Section 10 and find a crack. And that was the line, that specific decision, made with full knowledge, made because losing privately looked worse than losing publicly, that was the thing from which there was no coming back. They crossed it. They crossed it together. Hattie Burns filed the counterclaim on a Tuesday, 735 ILCS 5 halves. Illinois has a statute that lets courts financially punish parties who pursue lawsuits with no reasonable legal basis, particularly when those lawsuits exist primarily to harass or pressure the other party into submission. It is the legal system's way of saying, the courthouse is not a weapon. Attached as exhibits to Hattie's filing, the original complaint, Claire's email, 14 pages, that specific sentence underlined, 42 pages of Facebook posts in chronological order, the press conference transcript, the Granger's Bluff Courier article with Claire's quotes, the Tribune article, the HOA meeting minutes, and a copy of 745 ILCS 70, Section 10, in public statements in the press to use the legal system as a tool of economic and reputational pressure against a lawfully operating agricultural facility that predates this subdivision by 61 years. The documentary evidence makes the intent unambiguous. We are asking the court to address it accordingly. Desmond read the filing in his home office on the 3rd floor, the one with the view of the backyard, and if you leaned slightly right, the Mosley silo visible at the tree line. He called the insurance carrier. He did not tell Claire until after dinner. Desmond read it 3 times. He led with his best witnesses, an atmospheric scientist from Champaign who had charts and peer-reviewed citations and 7 similar cases in 3 states behind him, a real estate expert from Springfield who could quote property value impact statistics with clinical precision, neighbor witnesses who were genuine and affecting and said exactly what they had experienced without embellishment, because the truth was enough. The science was real. The data was real. The frustration was real. None of it was the right question. Hattie's cross-examinations were brief and ended the same way each time. To the scientist, was the odor level from Mosley's Hollow Farm different from what it would have been before Fenwick Crest was built? To the property expert, were these conditions knowable publicly? To each neighbor witness, did you research the agricultural operations in this area before you bought your home? None of them had. She thanked each one and sat down. Day 2, Hattie called one witness. I walked to the stand in my blue and white plaid flannel, the good one. She asked me to state my name and address. Everett James Mosley, 582 Mosley Hollow Road. How long have you lived there? My whole life, 71 years. Your family has operated an agricultural facility at that address since when? Father received the formal permit from Sangamon County in 1959. I have that permit. Original copy. It is in my filing cabinet, 2nd drawer. Has anything about the operation changed since Fenwick Crest was built? Number. Changed the number of hogs, the disposal practices, the feed delivery schedule. I talked for 18 minutes. I didn't embellish. I didn't try to sound sympathetic or historic or significant. I just told it the way it was. My great-grandfather filing the first property claim when McKinley was president. My grandfather building the barn 2 years after he buried his brother. My father signing the 1959 permit and using it to mortgage the land for equipment that carried us through the 60s. My wife Margaret, who kept the books for 40 years and could tell you the cost per pound of every hog we had ever raised. I talked about watching Fenwick Crest go up, house by house, the lights appearing over the tree line. I told it all in the same voice I would use explaining how to run a drainage tile. The facts of a life on a piece of land, laid out in order, requiring nothing added to make them mean what they mean. Then Hattie asked, "Have you changed anything about your operation since the lawsuit was filed? Have you changed anything since Fenwick Crest was built?" Just the specific quiet that falls when a point has been made and everyone in the room, including the people it was made against, knows it. Desmond's cross was brief and accomplished nothing. Day 3, Hattie rested the defense. Then she asked for the projector. The first image on the screen was Claire Whitmore's email. The full text. Every word. Projected large enough to read from the back of the courtroom. Hattie read it aloud. No inflection. No editorial commentary. No dramatic pauses. Just the words, in the order they were written. The way you read a document when the document is what matters. She read the property values section, then she waited. When she was finished, she turned off the projector and faced Judge Barker. Your Honor, she said, 35 years in courtrooms. The language people use when they think they are talking to their side. This is not the language of a community seeking remedy for a genuine grievance. This is the language of a campaign, organized, funded, media amplified, designed to use the legal system as a financial and reputational weapon against a lawfully operating agricultural facility that predates this subdivision by 6 decades. She paused. The legislature wrote Section 2611 for exactly this situation. We are asking the court to use it. She sat down. Desmond looked at his binder. 3 inches thick, organized by tab, every document in its right place. The kind of binder that represents the belief that if you prepare hard enough, the world will reflect that preparation. Judge Barker came back Monday morning with 22 pages. Nuisance claim, dismissed with prejudice. Mosley's Hollow Farm protected under 745 ILCS 70. Plaintiff failed to identify any legally cognizable basis for the claim under Illinois law. Vexatious litigation counterclaim, upheld in full. Documentary record of stated intent, coordinated public campaign, and failure to research controlling state law constituted vexatious and unreasonable litigation under 735 ILCS 5 611. Attorney's fees and costs $87,400. Vexatious litigation penalty $250,000. Total owed to Everett Mosley $337,400. And at the end, one more paragraph brief, precise, unavoidable, noting that the conduct of plaintiff's counsel in pursuing litigation without adequate research of controlling state law warranted referral to the Illinois Attorney Registration and Disciplinary Commission. In the courtroom afterward, Desmond packed his binder, tab by tab, document by document, slow and careful and precise, every paper in its right place. Claire was already outside, sitting in the Audi window up. That night there was a community meeting, a whiteboard with the number already on it before anyone sat down. $337,400. HOA reserve fund remaining, $12,000. Monthly fees, from $180 to $540. Effective next month. Someone, cried a woman in her early 30s who had moved from Aurora, because this was the neighborhood where she had wanted her child to grow up. Quiet, controlled crying, the kind where you are in public and cannot stop. Someone yelled. The people who could have answered weren't in the room. 8 months later, a letter came from Springfield. Desmond opened it, standing at the kitchen counter. Same counter, same morning light, same posture as the morning he would read the HOA's strategy brief 15 months earlier. Different envelope, very different contents. Illinois Attorney Registration and Disciplinary Commission. Licensed to practice law in the state of Illinois. Suspended 12 months. Failure to conduct adequate legal research prior to filing and maintaining a civil action. Pursuit of vexatious litigation. He read it twice. Put it face down on the counter. Claire came in, read it, set it back the same way he had, with the care of someone handling something that shouldn't be disturbed. Secamaker clicked. She got 2 mugs, the matching ones from a pottery studio in Springfield. Their first fall there, for the first time since they had been together. They had no next move. No strategy to run. No narrative to shape. No version of this they could present to the world that made it look like something other than what it was. They drank their coffee outside. The Mosley barn caught the morning light the way it always did. The oaks went in the following March. 14 red oaks, bald and burlapped, along the east fence line, 25 feet apart. Tommy dug. After the 6th tree, Tommy leaned on his shovel. The court didn't order this, he said. I know. You didn't have to. I know. So why? I looked down the fence line at the ones already in. Roots taking hold in the cold March ground. Because I can, I said. Because it is mine to plant on. He gave me the look, his mother's look. Also, I said, in about 8 years those trees are going to be 15 feet tall, and the east wind comes right through that fence line, and a good windbreak is a practical thing. He laughed. The real kind. There it is. We worked through the afternoon in the quiet that fathers and sons find after enough years together. The light went gold, then amber, then thinned toward the blue-gray of early spring in western Illinois, that specific color of the hour before the barn lights come on and the evening feed starts, and another day closes down the same way this land has closed, down 10,000 days before it. Before we put the last one in, Tommy straightened up and looked at me. "Did you know you were going to win?" I thought about it the way it deserved. "No," I said, "but I knew they were going to lose." I handed him the shovel. "Last one," I said. Same resistance in the frame, same view, same smell. Mosley's Hollow farm doing what it always did, on land that had always been there. And then she noticed something she hadn't noticed before. The oaks along the east fence line, 8 months old, nowhere near their final height, were already doing something, already interrupting the wind the way young trees do. When the rational move, the legally justified, financially prudent, personally unobligated move was to plant nothing and let the smell carry wherever it carried. He planted trees instead. She stood at the window and thought about Harriet Burns, flat shoes, old leather bag. 2 questions in a courtroom, 45 seconds total, that ended a case that 26 pages and 3 expert witnesses and a press conference and a Tribune article and a Facebook group with 340 members hadn't been able to save, she thought. That is not efficiency. That is what it looks like when someone has been reading things carefully for 35 years and knows the difference between preparation and armor. She thought about her sentence, without inflection, without needing to do anything except let it sit in the room and be exactly what it was. We are committed to pursuing this matter until they shut it down. They hadn't shut it down. The farm was right there. In February, the letter came from Springfield restoring Desmond's license. He read it. Filed it. He took smaller cases after that. Read more carefully. Asked more questions before filing anything. He developed, without naming it, the habit of looking up the specific statute in the specific state before applying a framework from anywhere else. Claire resigned the HOA presidency in April. 4 sentences. No explanation. No narrative. For a woman who had spent 20 years building narratives, it was the most deliberately nothing she had ever written. The first morning, Desmond drove back to work. He took the county road. The county road runs alongside Mosley's Hollow farm for half a mile. In February, the fields are bare and brown, and the 14 oaks along the east fence line are leafless, but present their shapes against the pale winter sky like something that was placed there by someone who thought far enough ahead. He drove slowly. He lowered the window. February air in Sangamon County is cold and clean, and it carries with it the smell of bare earth and cut corn stalks, and if the wind is right, the distant, warm, animal presence of a working hog operation that has been on that land since 1901 and has no plans to change. He didn't close the window. He drove all the way to Granger's Bluff with the window down, the cold coming in, on land that remembered things longer than the people who moved around it. The hogs don't know about any of it, which is probably the right attitude. Tommy will have this place someday. His kids will fix fence and feed hogs and watch whatever gets built next to whatever this becomes, and someone, somewhere, will open a window one morning and catch a face full of Mosley's Hollow farm and think, and the land will still be here patient. It has been on the books since 1981-43. Other states have versions of the same law. The vexatious litigation statute is real. Courts can and do use it. The RDC referral is real. Bad legal research in pursuit of an improper purpose has ended law careers. Most of the fights that look like the little guy versus the machine don't make the news because the little guy keeps his head down, calls the right person, and keeps feeding his hogs. The land was always going to outlast the lawsuit.